Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Dr. Dana Ellis Hunnes, who's here to share with us her new book, Recipe for Survival: What You Can Do to Live a Healthier and More Environmentally Friendly Life. So, Dr. Hunes is an adjunct assistant professor with the Fielding School of Public Health at the University of California, Los Angeles, and a senior dietitian at the Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center. She earned her BS in Nutrition and Human Biology from Cornell University and her Master's of Public Health and PhD from the Fielding School of Public Health at UCLA. At UCLA, she teaches courses on nutrition, chronic disease, and the environment. So let's welcome to the show Dr. Dana Ellis Hunnes.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I have to just ask, what inspired you to write this?
Yeah, it was a few things. I think, right after I finished my research for my PhD, which was in Ethiopia, where I was learning about how, really, truly climate change was affecting the lives of individuals. It was also, I had my son pretty soon thereafter, and I'm looking down at this tiny little baby, not even 6 pounds. And I'm just thinking to myself, everything I've learned, oh my goodness, I want to keep this planet as safe as possible for him. I've learned so much. And so really, those were my two inspirations for sure.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your background, because I know that you're a dietitian. How did the climate part really become important to you?
Well, growing up, I was always obsessed with watching the Weather Channel. I would monitor hurricanes and droughts and things like that, and it was just so fascinating to me. And then when I started my doctoral studies at UCLA, I realized there's this whole area of nutrition and food and the environment that really isn't very well studied or very well communicated. So I think just kind of the combination of my interest in nutrition, my background in just being very interested in the climate in general, and then my interest in explaining things to people as an educator, I think just kind of coalesced into kind of what we see today with the book and other things I've written.
Well, I am definitely excited that we're talking about your book, Recipe for Survival. I think it's so important. And do you feel like when people are looking at just, how our planet is altogether, sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming and scary?
Oh, absolutely. When you think about, the number of people living on the planet and kind of what is happening in terms of global warming, oceans are warming, coral reefs are dying, and, it's getting harder to grow food in certain areas of the country or the world. It just feels beyond overwhelming. And honestly, it can feel depressing. And I'll be quite honest, I did go through a period of both astonishment and kind of depression, but writing about it and learning more about it gave me the ability to process what I was learning and come out the other end with kind of this idea of empowerment. Like, we're not powerless. We're not, it feels overwhelming, but we're not dependent solely on government making decisions for us about whether or not they're going to act on the climate. So I think that's really where the book came into fruition. Is it was so overwhelming learning about this. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what can I do as an individual to really make a difference?
So, what were a couple of the things that really concerned you when you were writing the book? And I don't want to get into everything because there's so much here. I was looking at it going, oh boy, but it does provide a lot of hope, I believe.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think some of the biggest areas that I see as most concerning are really, are we going to be able to grow a sufficient amount of food given the fact that we're cutting down so much rainforest and we are changing rainfall cycles and droughts and things of that nature? And then, secondly, I think another thing that concerns me is really the sustainability of our food supply, both on land in terms of what we're growing, how many animals that we are growing, and how many more animals we will have to, I guess, grow in order to feed the world if people want to eat this way. And also from an ocean standpoint, in terms of how many fish are we actually pulling out of the ocean? And is this sustainable? Can the oceans continue to thrive and feed the number of people who want to eat, fish products?
Yes, I saw a documentary recently and it was horrifying just how fishing is in different places around the world and how they're just basically um, killing everything. So it makes it really difficult to look at it and go, gosh, how are we going to, have this as a resource that people can count on sometimes?
Right, and I think that is something to remember. Is that we share this planet with 7.9 billion other people, and soon, almost 11 billion people. But not only that, we share the planet with other species, and so it's not just a resource to be utilized; it's a home to so many of us, and well, to every one of us, actually. Everything we know really is on this planet. Everything we love is on this planet, and so we have to take care of it.
So let's talk about recycling because I know there are some communities that have that, some that are still trying to figure that out. What is recycling and how does that really work for us?
Right. So, recycling, the idea behind recycling is that we use a product, and then rather than throw it into the trash where it goes to the landfill, we put it into a very nice recycling bin, and then it goes and gets melted or reconstituted into raw ingredients to create yet again another product. And that works super well for glass or metals like tin cans or aluminum. But when it comes to plastic, unfortunately, once it's been made, it's really hard to kind of remake it into the same product. It actually has to be what's called downcycled and made into other products that may or may not be of lesser quality. It really just depends. So, but even so, unfortunately, it's a very inefficient process, and so something like only 9% of plastics only really ever get recycled.
Oh wow. That's just stunning because I mean we have the ability to do that.
Well, I think some of that is related to the concept that not everyone is recycling, or maybe not everyone has the access to recycling that everyone else does. So there are some cities, and counties or rural areas potentially that don't necessarily have the same recycling capabilities that bigger cities might have. But again, a lot of it does also come down to the processing in general, and just the efficiency of it is not there. We're just making far too much plastic too quickly, that it just can't all be recycled quickly enough.
So how can we help change that? What can we do that would impact not just recycling, but how products are showing up for us and which ones that we choose?
Right, absolutely. I mean, so one thing that you can do is every time you buy a product, you are essentially voting with your dollar. You are telling a company, I like this product, I like the way it's made, and I want to continue to buy it. If you start making changes, or in a way demand change with the way you're buying things, or contacting a company and making requests, that is one way to move the needle. So just remember, when you are using things and buying things, you are basically saying, hey, I like this product and I want it made this particular way. Another thing you can do is you can get your own reusable water bottles and your own reusable shopping bags, and on your end do as much as you possibly can to not use plastic products. But in the end, a lot of it does come down to a bigger industrial like complex in that companies are using plastic packaging. And so I think, there do need to be some regulations in general on that. And by, again, voting for people who do care about these issues, that's another way of handling it. So that's kind of three different ways of thinking about plastic from a broader sense to an individual sense.
And as we shift maybe from a solely meat diet to, let's say people are looking to switch to a plant-based diet, what
Mhm.
are some of the benefits, not just to ourselves, but to the environment as well?
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to the major health benefits of switching to a plant based diet, including potentially reversing some chronic diseases and preventing certain chronic diseases, when it comes to the environment, oh my gosh, it's a huge savings. We're saving more than 50% as much water. We're saving about 8 to 9 times as much water with a plant-based diet. You can grow, about 10,000 times as many calories on a plant-based diet on 1 acre of land as you can an animal-based diet. And you're using far fewer resources. It can take 2,000 gallons of water just to produce 1 pound of meat. And the amount of land that requires similarly is a huge savings when you go plant-based. So if you want to do good for the environment, I mean, absolutely what you put on your plate 3 times a day, sometimes more if you're a snacker, really makes a huge difference.
And when you talk about plant-based, does that mean like vegan, vegetarian?
Vegan and vegetarian to me are more of how people ascribe themselves. It's sort of a descriptor. I am vegan, I am vegetarian. So that's more of kind of like a characteristic or trait or an identification. However, being plant based or eating a plant based diet is more about the food. So to me, no, you don't need to call yourself vegan. You don't need to be vegan. But I do encourage people, especially people who are incredibly concerned about climate change and the environment, to look at their plate and say, how can I have this meal be a more plant-based meal? How can I crowd out the meat? How can I make substitutions that are both extremely healthy and environmentally friendly? Maybe I'm not ready to call myself vegetarian or vegan, but I can be empowered to look at my plate and make some changes here.
So I know in your book you talk about, you know, the new pandemic and how it's really could be like a foodborne illness. Why don't you share a little bit about that with us?
Right. So, it is believed that COVID did come from a spillover from an animal. And it is estimated that in the future, 3 out of every 4 new infectious diseases will come from animals that spill over into the human population and then spread that way. So, when you think about that, the way animals are housed in industrial farming situations, they are in very close confinement. In fact, it's called a CAFO, confined animal feeding operation. And you can have thousands of animals living together in very stressful situations, being fed antibiotics, which in and of itself is a harmful situation because 60 to 70% of all important antibiotics that we use for health are fed to animals. And so that means that there's a lot of antibiotic resistance. But also just them living in close confinement, they're spreading viruses amongst each other. And then when humans are interacting with them to feed them or, take them to their end of their life, that brings them into contact with some of these diseases.
Yeah, all these things kind of come full circle. And it's interesting. Everything's so connected. Is it the fact that if we like really focus on one part, maybe that helps the rest?
I really do believe that, yes, because it is very circular and everything, as you said, is interconnected. If we can make a positive difference in even one aspect, it all sort of filters down, it all, it is all interconnected. So you make the change of, hey, we're eating fewer animal products, so we don't need to raise as many animals, and so they don't need to be as confined, or they can have a better quality of life. That just, knock on effects makes the animals healthier, and for the people who want to still eat animal products, that makes their animal products healthier, and them healthier as well.
So, how can we eat better and support our local area?
So I'm a big advocate of, if they're in your area, going to farmers markets where you can meet farmers or their employees, and really just get a taste of farm fresh produce. And also it saves on plastic packaging, because they're using, crates or other things that are very reusable. And then you can bring your own reusable bags and shop that way, which is very much giving back to the local farmers. Another option is community supported agriculture. So you basically are buying a share of a farmer's crop. You're giving them the money to make their crop, and then you get your crops, every week or so. And so I'm a big proponent of that, because in a way you can support your local farms and your local community, and show them, hey, I care about what you do, and I appreciate what you do, and I'm going to get healthy food in exchange for that. And then there's also the idea of community gardens, where you yourself can grow some of your own food. So it's called sweat equity, which means you're putting in the work, but you're also reaping the rewards.
That is so exciting to see those around town and in different places.
Mhm.
And I think it's so great to also be connected, with the local farmers. You get to see what's in season and really kind of plan around that.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many new dishes we've developed because of what we get in our CSA box every week, or because, we have a community garden plot and we had so much arugula. I mean, it was just so funny how we literally every meal was arugula, 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 but it's delicious. And when you get it so farm fresh and right from the garden, I mean, the quality can't be beaten. So absolutely.
Oh, I get that. I had 1 year of overstock of tomatoes. So,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
you give it away to friends real quick.
That,
So,
or you learn how to do some canning or jarring, or learning how to store it properly, which I also talk about a little bit, so that you're not throwing away perfectly good food, which we do way too much of in this country.
well, that's exactly what I want to talk about next is the food waste. I mean, I've heard about some numbers on this, and it is just amazing that we have people who are homeless and starving, and yet all this food's being thrown out. What are some ways that we can kind of do a little bit better with our, food waste?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really like to talk about is the idea of shopping lists and food lists. What am I meal planning? So 40% of food in the United States is tossed out before it's ever eaten. And that is just a shame, as you said, because of so many people that could benefit from this food. And so when you consider that, if you also think about the fact that that's $1,000 per family that gets tossed out every year, there are many things that we can do. So I talk about meal planning, and that's something that we do. We figure out, hey, this is what we're going to be eating for dinner every night this week, and if we're, having food at home for lunches, or my son is at school, it just helps to know exactly how much of a product we need to buy, so we don't end up throwing it out because either it went bad, or we bought too much of it, or we bought things we didn't need. And then also, I'm a big fan of shopping lists for the same reason. So you know exactly how much you need to buy once you figure out what you're having for the week. So those are two important things. And then also, storing food properly is a huge component of avoiding food waste, because then you're not throwing away perfectly good food because you let it sit on the shelf too long, or whatever the case may be, in the fridge.
Yeah, I understand that. As a single person, it's kind of a battle sometimes because if you go get lettuce, it's like a big thing of lettuce. And so
Mhm.
you have to kind of gauge, like, do I get spinach? Because then I can cook that and have that later.
Yeah, no, and that's a great thing to do. Buy one thing and repurpose it for something else. And that's something else that we do in our house. If we do make something that is coming towards the end of its life, we might then, for example, like we make homemade pesto, and once it's coming to the end of its life, I'll make a soup, and instead of cutting up a whole nother head of garlic and adding basil, because those are two great things in soup, I'll just throw in the rest of the pesto and it gets boiled and it's perfectly fine again.
Oh, that's a great idea. I love that. I'll be using that. So,
There you go.
oh my goodness. And you have these great recipes in the back. Which one's one that really stands out for you that you really enjoy?
Hmm. Um, I mean, they're all action recipes, so they're really kind of, it is a play on words. I'm not gonna, sugarcoat that. They're not necessarily like food meal recipes, but they are action recipes. Like, here are the things that you can do right now. And I think honestly, one of my favorite ones really is the jarring, canning, and freezing, to be quite honest with you, because it really is a way to extend the life of your food and to have, during early days of the pandemic, and even now, you see pictures of grocery store shelves that are half empty, or freezer shelves that are half empty. But if you have some of these foods in your own freezer or canned um, on your own shelf, that's one less thing you have to be stressing out about. So that's, I don't know, every day it's like a different one. If you ask me tomorrow, it would be a completely different opinion of which is my favorite. But right now, I think that's my favorite today.
I get it. It's like probably choosing a favorite child there, it'd be kind of difficult.
Yep.
Well, and with canning, I've never done that, but it sounds really interesting. Is there kind of a resource that you would suggest that people can learn?
I strongly recommend YouTube as a great place to get the information. There are books, of course, on how to jar and can, but I do find that there are some really great like YouTube videos if you just search, and they will kind of walk you through it step by step. Because we don't necessarily have our grandparents around to show us how to do those kinds of things. So I do think having the visuals of how to do it is super helpful.
Oh yeah, I'm all for using YouTube for instructions,
Yep. Hmm.
Well, and I'm just so excited because we've got so many young people that are just like showing up today that are so interested in the environment. And
Mhm.
so, how can young people encourage their parents, parents encourage their children to become more involved in that?
Well, I think it's important to really, do try to do things together as a family whenever possible, because it shows that, you care, and it shows that you support one another in whatever it is that you care about. So definitely, I think also just talking about it in the house is really a good thing. Basically, since the day my kid was born, we've been talking about all these issues in our house. And so for him, it's very second nature. We go for a walk and he's like, oh, look at that hummingbird. And, then it goes on to a conversation about, oh, and there's plastic on the ground. And oh my goodness, we should pick that up. And so I think just, being open to these types of discussions and just being aware, because if you're not aware, you're not necessarily going to know where to start. So I think just being open to these discussions and just making it part of the everyday language is a really great way to start.
Are there certain resources that parents can use to help, for a child that's really into climate change and the environment, that they can go ahead and support them with that? I know a book like yours would be a great start. you know?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think. I'm actually trying to work on maybe one for children, so that they can have some ideas that may be in the works. We'll see. But yeah, I do think there are, several movies and documentaries and other books out there about the environment that I do list in my book as it's recipe number 21, like books and documentaries that you can read for additional information to support your journey. But I think, just looking around and seeing what other opportunities there are, maybe in the schools or at your local community college or local university, can also be a good place to start.
Well, I liked recipe number 13, buy fewer things and less stuff, because I mean, how much stuff do we really need,
Right. And that's something that really brought home to me when I was in Ethiopia. I was interviewing migrants from rural villages who had come into the capital city of Addis Ababa. And literally the only thing they had was, the clothes on their back and their grit and their desire to, earn cash income with whatever they had to do in the city. And they had very few things and almost nothing. And they were some of the most warm and generous people I've ever met in my entire life. They had literally like nothing. And they wanted to share what little they had with me. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? So, yeah, I mean, I think it goes to show you we don't need nearly as many things that we just end up throwing away in a few months anyway, as we think we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some ways it's a little bit of an overconsumption, and how I think people look at things and food and what have you.
Hmm. Yeah, we do have a little issue with, I think, throwaway culture in this country, unfortunately.
Yeah, the fast food drive-through, give it to me, in 10 minutes kind of culture.
Hmm.
So how can people get involved in like their community gardens?
So one of the ways to get involved in community gardens is, well, first of all, look up where they are in your city. There may be one even a lot closer than you think. And then usually they're looking for people who want to join the garden and really put in the work and the effort. So, and a lot of these community gardens offer seeds and offer learning programs so you can understand a little bit more about urban agriculture and just agriculture in general. So I think, just put in a little Google research or a few minutes just to kind of figure out where they are in your local community. And, the rest is really there at the garden. You'll learn so much while interacting.
You often hear experts talk about how the climate change we're beyond the tipping point, or some say we're at the tipping point. Where do you think we are, and can we make changes that would make an impact?
I mean, as far as the research that I have looked into from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the United Nations, and other experts, it really is looking like this is the last decade to really make changes that can keep warming to the recommended level, if that's even the right terminology, to minimize the amount of warming that will occur. So really, I think we are, if we're not already at that tipping point, where basically no matter what you do, Earth is going to continue getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and the effects are going to be bad for coral reefs, for trees and other species. I really do think this is the time where we need to act. We should have acted yesterday, the day before that, but it's never too late. Is until 2030 is what the reports say, to really make a difference now. So I urge everyone, this is the time. Don't sit back and wait for government to make the decision to act when you have some power to act right now.
Oh my goodness, of course. Yeah. And it's interesting because, it seems that people are so used to getting everything they want at any time that,
Mhm.
global warming and how the climate's going through this massive change that's going to affect us dramatically later is kind of something they put on the back burner.
Well, we all have a lot of competing demands on our mental space right now. A lot of people are caring for children and trying to work and caring for perhaps they're not adults, their parents as well. And so there's a lot to be thinking about. And so it is hard to find that mental space to also be thinking about this overwhelming concept of climate change and feeling like there's nothing you can do. But that's where I think my book really comes into play, is it is telling people, hey, I get it. This is overwhelming and it is a lot to think about, but there are things that you can do so you don't feel so overwhelmed. And so you do feel like you're making a difference. And a lot of the difference you are making really does matter.
That's what an important takeaway that is. I think a lot of people, that's a silver lining that we need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dana, I just loved your book. I thought it was such a great resource. It has so much information. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Dana Ellis Hunnes. I'm on Instagram at Dana Ellis Hunnes. I'm on Facebook at Dana Ellis Hunnes. And then I have a website, danaellishunnes.com. So fortunately, once you know my name, you don't have to remember a whole lot of other catchy phrases. It's just my name on all of the various social media.
Well, Dana, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad that you learned a lot.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hunes, for spending this time with us today. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you about your new book, Recipe for Survival: What You Can Do to Live a Healthier and More Environmentally Friendly Life. Recipe for Survival is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And if you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. And remember, support our indie bookstores. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after this message. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.